We are sitting here with Àgèlògbàgàn Agbovi first, who is the Àgèlògbàgàn or king of Ganlodo Oteme, or the Ganlodo monarchy here in America. Briefly tell us what Ganlodo is.
Ganlodo is a New African, we could say a New African Vodun. Vodun, New African, vice versa, whatever. Basically what we're saying is that this is the first Dahomean kingdom or monarchy, and we rather use the term monarchy, ever in the Western Hemisphere as a matter of fact, ever outside of Benin Republic. And it should be known that it's not just that we are just using the language of Dahomey or the old Dahomean Federation, but we're using the culture, the culture that we have inherited. So in that we are Vodun practitioners, West African Vodun, primarily from the Dahomey perspective. But the New African part is that we realize that, our culture is dynamic. Things are accumulated that are in line with the original protocols of the culture, and they fit to the specific geography and historical framework of the people that are practicing Vodun at that time, and that is African black people that are practicing.
Okay. And Vodun, what is the meaning? Is there a meaning?
Vodun has been described as that deep mystery. Like, that's the general way to say that Vodun is a deep mystery. The actual meaning of Vodun centers around reflection, to rest and reflect. That's what Vodun means. So in African cosmology, in particular Vodun, we talk about elevating the spirit and traveling with the spirit by reflecting. And the water, scene, we call it scene in the phone language. They are the examples of reflection. They're also examples of the mirror, the ancestors, and that type of thing. When we say to rest, reflect before drawing the water. So Vodun itself, the term Vodun itself is part of a longer phrase that translates loosely into English as reflecting before drawing the water. The water being the source of life, meaning the deities, the ancestors, your personal spirit, Mawu Segbo Lisa, which is the creator, Hunte. Hunte in the phone language means etc.
Are faith and belief part of Vodun?
That's a good question. We don't do belief. In Vodun, we know. We don't even have a term in Fonbe or Yoruba. I speak Yoruba also. I've never run into a term that means belief. We know, and we know based on the experience. We experience the deities. One of the aspects of how we experience the divinities, or an example, how we experience divinity, is through spirit possession. A lot of people talk about, they get possessed in the tradition, and the deities come down. Well, that's part of the experience. But also, too, the experience is just spirit itself. Everything does not have to be about a divinity coming within you. Sometimes you go into the divinity. We say in Vodun and in the Sheshe tradition that Mawu, the creator, reaches down when you reach up. So we experience Vodun. That's how we know it. We don't believe it. Faith is based on what we already know. So we have faith in the experience, but no belief. Because belief is some doubt there, if you understand what I'm saying.
And what about the concepts of heaven and hell?
Heaven and hell, we don't have. That is a Abrahamic, Christian, Islamic, Judaic belief. We have realms of existence. In Vodun, we talk about the 16 existences. We also talk about 16 realms of existence, and we talk about the 16 realms of the soul. 16 is a very important number when talking about spirituality. A soul can elevate to any one of those 16 levels based once again on their experience. We call it blojo in the phone language. So according to your blojo, which I think the Indians call it karma, we experience any one of those realms. Now, the Christians, in their misunderstanding and not even misunderstanding of those type of concepts, when they were stealing their various concepts from Kemet and the like, they had to translate it the best way they could, so they just said heaven and hell. But the soul exists at any given time on these 16 realms. So one of the realms is Yetume. And Yetume or Yetome is the realm of your spirit, where your soul detaches and goes to, even on a nightly basis. You know, when you dream and the like, your soul goes to Yetume and has these different experiences. And they're translated back down to your Poli, your spiritual head, as these dreams that we often forget, you know, if we don't speak about them as soon as we wake up. But there's no heaven and hell. There's degrees of existence. Some existences are not good as others, and as bad as others, vice versa. And that's what the Christians would say, heaven and hell. But we don't have heaven and hell.
Okay, so a nice segue into the next question about the concept of destiny. Mm-hmm. You speak a little bit about destiny, a person's personal destiny.
Gotcha. The word for destiny in the Fong language, Fong Bei, is set. And ironically, the word for spirit, or your personal soul, your personal spirit, is set. The aspect of destiny in relation to the human, the individual African human, we call Bato. Bato is the true, authentic human being, the one who rises to the spiritual level, even on the mundane level of the things they need to do. But that aspect of the spirit that contains your destiny of life is called the Sepoli. The Sepoli. Each person comes into this world with an agreement that they made with Mawu Segbo Lisa, which is the creator, with the Kulita, which are the ancestors, with the Vodun, which are the deities, and various other spirits that are attached to one's lineage, clan, and personal experiences. And these things from past lives, usually you have been here before. Sometimes there are new souls birthed. But in the case of destiny in relation to coming back, usually you come back with a purpose. A lot of times it's dealing with things that you needed to complete in a previous lifetime or previous lifetimes. You may come back with missions from your family, from certain family members, and all that becomes part of your destiny. So your individual destiny is also related to your lineage destiny. And so the destiny is contained in the Sepoli, and the Bokono, the diviner, divines to ascertain what this destiny is. Now, why does the Bokono or the five priests of diviner have to do that? It's because when we're born, that umbilical cord, when we break from the umbilical cord, we also break that direct remembrance, that direct relationship with the Creator. But once again, we know that like children are more connected to spirit than adults. You see them looking off, you see them smiling, you see them look like they contemplate, look like they're listening to certain spirits that are talking. And they are, you know. But the older we get, the more we lose that direct connection. So going back to the umbilical cord thing, the breaking, the cutting of the umbilical cord represents the beginning of the losing of the touch, the direct in touchness with the destiny. So we have to relearn it. And so a lot of times we have to go to the diviners. But it's not only through divining. We have experiences through our ancestors, various spirits, deities, and whatnot that remind us, sometimes cajole us into knowing who we are, who we originally meant to be in our Sepoli in its relationship to Mawu Segbo.
Okay. Can you talk about why Vodun would be considered an ancestral tradition? What exactly that means?
Ancestral in relation to
how, through the blood.
Oh, good question. It is not an ecumenical tradition. It's not a universalistic tradition. We know that many people flavored and tainted by New Age and certain Western ideologies will tell you that Vodun is universal. They'll tell you, various African traditions are universal. And that's the furthest from the truth. Vodun, just like any African tradition, is related to your spiritual and blood DNA. Your spiritual and blood DNA. So, for instance, if you do not descend from what people in the West, I think they call them tribes, but these are nations. If you do not descend from nations that practice these traditions, then you have no claim to these traditions. The same goes for the so-called Native American traditions, Norse mythology with the Europeans. It's only when we get to the Abrahamic religions who teaches us to think in imperial terms, meaning that my way is the best way for all of you to think, therefore I'm going to convert you to everything. Many Africans who have reverted, not converted, but reverted to African traditions, bring the Abrahamic thinking into African traditions. Therefore they say, well, these traditions are for everybody. They're not. As the Ahosi of Ganlodo Hotome said one time, said many times, especially in relation to the Yovo. Yovo means European, non-African really, but she was talking about Europeans in particular. Let them show you what so-called tribe they trace themselves back to in Africa, and we'll give them all the divinities. They can't do that. So this is not a tradition for non-African. If a person has non-African friends, that doesn't mean you're a certain way by simply stating the truth. The truth is that these are the blood divinities. These are blood divinities. They're related to our blood, our ancestry, which is our blood. On one hand, we always talk about our ancestors, but we never think about Hevioso, Dambe, Dam, Ayido Wedo, and various other divinities are related in blood to these ancestors. So on one end we say ancestors this and that, then on the next instance we say, well, this tradition is for everybody. That means you're trying to claim other people's ancestry into your ancestral pool, which is anathema to the true cosmology of Vodun.
Okay. Well, let's talk about love and charity. Is that a part of Vodun?
Oh, most definitely. And unfortunately, people don't talk about it. One of the key concepts, like a pillar of Vodun, is Nuniya, which is that's the word for charity in Vodun, and in the phone language in general, but Vodun in particular, as a concept. And it encompasses not just charity one-to-one, with charity towards the community, but also it deals with the stewardship of the land. So charity it's hard to describe it from a phone perspective, one-to-one comparison to the European, because we think of charity from the European perspective, we're thinking of giving something away, money, blah, blah, blah. But in the phone perspective, the Vodun perspective, charity extends to taking care of the earth. We feel that we take care of the earth, we take care of one another. We can take care of one another one-to-one, one to a group to group, but we also take care of the earth. The earth is called Ayi, and it is our most sacred thing that we have. Without proper taking care of that, we don't have human charity.
Okay, and what about ethics?
Ethics. It is embodied in our concept of character. And once again, translating these words to European languages, it loses something in the translation. But when we say character, we're talking about the whole gamut of taboos, things to do and not to do on a spiritual level, things to do and not to do on it. The word for taboo is su in the phone language. Things not to do and not to do on the mundane level. So this whole character and ethics thing is connected in the Vodun tradition, because to do the right thing is to do the right thing on the mundane level is to do the will of Mawu Lisa, which is the creator, the Kulita, which are the ancestors, the Vodun, and the various other spirits that we serve.
And prosperity, financial prosperity, not just financial, but in particular, financial prosperity. Is that something that can coincide with Vodun or any other African ancestral tradition?
Vodun is not a poverty conscious movement. That's unfortunately many within the various African traditional movements in the United States have taken that ideology that Orisha Vodun is to be not necessarily poor, but not to strive for the highest goal, and that is totally against the traditions of Vodun.
Okay.
We believe in prosperity, but we do not believe in prosperity at the cost of spirit. So therefore we seek balance. We seek the highest goal on each side. The highest we can go spiritually, the highest we can go mundanely with finances, wealth and whatnot, without it consuming us. If the wealth consumes us, it becomes our deity, therefore we're out of balance. If we're too spiritual and we're not concerned about the wealth, generations, we need to think, in Vodun they teach us to think 5 generations ahead. We're supposed to be thinking 5 generations ahead. We make a purchase in Vodun, big or small. It's supposed to be, how will this affect the 5th generation? I will get this land today. How do I keep it in the family for at least 5 generations? And it's done that way to accumulate wealth over time. And also degrees of sovereignty, we call Ijoba.
Can you talk a little bit about sacred spaces like forests and rivers and other bodies of water?
Okay. Well, you mentioned forests. That goes into what we were talking about earlier about the stewardship of the land. There are many sacred forests in Africa, not just in Vodun, but the Zunme, the forest, takes a very high priority in the Vodun tradition. As a matter of fact, it's only certain people are allowed to come into the forest. You have caretakers of the forest, and they are called Zumeto. Those are the people that are responsible for guarding the forest. They're responsible for upkeeping the physical trees and various sacred shrubs, various sacred plants, and also too, they are responsible for attending to the shrines, the various shrines in the forest. Rivers, same thing. In the tradition proper, it is taboo to pollute. And it's whenever and I want to make something clear. When I mention Su in Vodun, there's a violation of Su usually means there's some type of fine. So it's not just lip service that we give this. It's actual, everything is followed by action, whether it's something, a positive reward or a negative reward in the case of violating Su. So yes, the rivers, the forests are sacred. Each of the sacred trees in the forest are associated with a divinity. Each river is associated with a divinity. And from a New African perspective, we have also identified various divinities that are associated with certain trees, certain rivers here in North America.
Okay, and lastly, can you speak about animal sacrifice?
That's one of the most controversial things. We'll start by saying that, historically, most people have done animal sacrifice for thousands of years. Muslims still do it, Jews still do it. Many of the Hindus, certain sects of the Hindu tradition still do it. However, in African tradition, we're at a crossroads of development, meaning, do we automatically go to a sacrifice just because historically this is what was done when a particular case comes up? Or do we go to a more set, the spiritual self? Do we go to a more set perspective and say, what is the minimum we could do to ascertain results, prosperity, whatever for this particular case? So the problem is that many people, they jump to animal sacrifice too quick. They automatically, bam, we're doing this ceremony, there must be an animal. My question, and this will be controversial to many, let's look at the state of Africa. Let's look at the state of the African community globally. Many of us practice animal sacrifice. Where is it getting us? On the scale that we're using it, on the scale of how many animals are being killed, and trust me now, most of the animals, except for in the case of severe sickness and death, the meat is eaten. But a lot of the animals are not. And we understand the transference of blood and what that means, transference of certain sicknesses into these vehicles. But as a whole, as a collective, you must always ask, is your tradition progressing? And measure that progress by the progress of your average person. So when we look at Africa, we look at Dahomey, we look at Nigeria, we look at Ghana, we see a picture that is a little bleak. And we start to see that maybe something else needs to be done, maybe not necessarily in the place of animal sacrifice, but before we start focusing so much on the animal sacrifice, let's look at some of these other things, like keeping our shrines aesthetically beautiful. What about that? Because I don't think the deities, just like me and you and anybody else that's looking at this video, I don't think nobody like to stay in a dirty place. So while we're studying giving blood, the deities are screaming saying, okay, that's cool, but can you at least clean up my shrine? You sing my praises, Fombe, Gumbe, Yoruba, and all these beautiful languages. You dress up in all these pretty clothes, but look at my shrine. Can you build a proper temple for me? And so I think that's where we're at with animal sacrifice. I think that it's done too quickly, off the bat, too quickly a lot of times, and it's overdone. And I think we need to be looking more at development of self, and I say that as Ganlodo Hosu.
Okay, well, that's all the questions that I had. Thank you very much.
Ache, and Ache Nuwe.